Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, sustaining Alaska's pipeline and its operations today and into the future.
Find a living in fisheries. The UAS Fisheries Technology Program offers online study from anywhere in Alaska, plus labs and workshops in many Alaska towns.
Is most likely a chum.
Find your living without leaving where you are. Fisheries Technology from UAS.
The National Weather Service.
And good Thursday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It is the 16th of March. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that by calling us at the Alaska Weather Information Line at 800-472-0391. Find us online on weather.gov/Alaska/Juneau/Fairbanks/Anchorage or AAWU for the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, and many other places that you can fine-tune the information you want to receive and get there a little bit faster. If you can't find what you want, please send us a note at nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. We're happy to help. We love to see your weather pictures from your community, even if it's just a picture from your cell phone that you'd like to take around your village, or show us how the snow's doing, or if it's melting, or if it's still coming down if you're in parts of Southeast. We'd love to see that, and we'd love to share it right here on Alaska Weather. So thanks for doing that, and we look forward to it. Here's a look at what's going on around Alaska. No watches, warnings, or advisories. Instead, we're going to talk about the snow and rain continuing for parts of Southeast tonight, though not quite as intense as it was just 24 hours ago. It looks like some of that was still falling around the Haines and Skagway region and Glacier Bay. That will slowly subside. It's not going to be as windy in South Central, but if you're out close to the inlet there, the winds will probably pick up during the evening and overnight hours there. Places like Birchwood and Northwood will likely see some of those gusty winds, as the weather pattern still hasn't changed a whole lot. But the big winds for more places have settled down a little bit. And it looks like warmer days are coming to the interior. If you're around the middle Tanana Valley, the eastern interior, and even northward toward the Brooks Range, it will be somewhat warmer, though your nighttime temperatures will still be well below zero, anywhere from 15 to 30 below. But your daytime high temperatures, perhaps by the weekend, could be sneaking above zero. So warmer, of course, is always a relative term in Alaska. And snow and freezing fog is expected for the Seward Peninsula out across the west. It looks like a band of snow is moving your way. Watch for that to start creeping its way toward Nome in the coming days here as well. The satellite picture shows low pressure is still in charge of the Gulf and high pressure is still in charge of the Bering Sea, but it's getting a little bit harder to find those definitive points of low pressure across the Bering Sea now. A trained meteorologist and a weather watcher like yourself, of course, could look a little bit closer to this area right here and watch the spin. And knowing that low pressure systems in the northern hemisphere rotate in a counterclockwise fashion, you would probably say, it looks like a low right there. And because you're also highly trained and a skilled weather watcher of Alaska weather, you'll notice that there's also another little spin right about here. And you can see that spiraling in on itself. So there are indeed two circulations here across the Gulf. This, of course, bringing in that southerly wind, wrapping into that counterclockwise circulation, is bringing up moisture. And at times, just wave after wave has been working through southeastern Alaska. This afternoon, we were seeing some periods of snow, moderate to even occasionally heavy, out around the Haines area there. So no doubt you're still going to get some snow out of this, but it won't be as concentrated and perhaps as intense as it was the last 3 days, the last 2 days, even last night. So hopefully some improvement there if you're tired of the rain and snow, that is. If you love it, well, there you go. Across South Central, the backside of this low pressure combination here is dragging those drier cold winds through the inlet, and at at night, they pick up a little bit across the inlet, but they're not quite as widespread, not quite as intense, because a lot of that has been filling into this low pressure vacuum here, and the vacuum has been filling up. So that's why our low doesn't look quite as impressive on the satellite picture as it does anymore. And because of that cold air draining out, and because of increased daylight hours across Alaska, because of slowly chipping away at some of the snow across the interior, those interior temperatures are going up. But it takes a lot of work to get there with March daylight. About 5 minutes or so a day, little by little. It truly does happen, but it is still mid-March. Up north, high pressure is still in charge across the north slope. Winds are fairly light here. You can see kind of a west to easterly flow overall. And out across the west, that high pressure ridge is a little bit more stout out across the Bering Sea. You can see more of a northerly flow coming down the west coast. And there's our high right there at 1,031 millibars, feeding into those two circulations around the Gulf. A couple pockets of snow, some of that around St. Lawrence Island, Savunga, and Gamble today in the western tip around Wales, and northward toward Cape Lisburne and Point Hope. We did have snow across the northern parts of Southeast, but as far as I could tell, there really wasn't a whole lot more to write home about as far as precipitation goes today. Now tonight, there's still a possibility for some rain and snow showers across Southeast. Low pressures hovering in the Gulf around 996 millibars. On the back side of that, we might still find a band of snow showers there. So if you know anybody traversing the Gulf tonight, they could go from rain to maybe snow by early morning tomorrow if they're really beating it across the Gulf. Out across the central and western chain, some pockets of rainfall there all the way from Kiska to Attu, and that might start to change over a little bit there. Notice there's a brief little push of warmer air that's moving eastward, but remember, all of this is considerably colder. So watch what happens as we go into tomorrow. It pretty much falls apart. But aloft, that warm and wet air that's trying to work its way north and east probably will squeeze out some snowflakes there. So there's a chance that if you're in Nome watching tonight, tending some dogs, possibly you're going to see some snow tonight and again tomorrow. It doesn't look like a whole lot, but it'll probably be cold and snowy there in Nome, and that seems about right for March with dogs in the area. Snow showers across the eastern Alaska range will be possible, but notice how much cloud cover doesn't move westward. This is that very dry flow descending out of the interior, so that's going to eat up quite a bit of that moisture, it looks like, as we move to the south side of that. For Friday, high pressure is parked pretty close to Barrow at 1,028 millibars. Generally clear skies in the morning and at night across the Brooks Range all the way through the central interior. Parts of Southwest start to get into more clouds there. You can see those are creeping eastward. And across Kodiak Island, the sky looks fairly clear. Now, as we get into Saturday, those two low pressure waves, they're still kind of spinning around, doing their little dance here across the Gulf. One of those moves a little bit closer to southeast at 999 millibars, and that's going to bring up some of that coastal muck into central and southern southeast. Rain and snow showers there. Across the northern Gulf, there's a better chance that this will be snow showers if any of that actually makes it onto land. Places to watch would be Seward and Cordova and Middleton Island, and maybe out toward the Barren Islands, maybe the northern end of Kodiak Island, but by and large, it doesn't look like a lot of this is going to be slung up into south central, and a better chance that you'll see widely scattered showers of rain and snow, at times rain in the day, and probably leaning back towards snow at night, especially for central and northern parts of southeast. That'll be your challenge where you are. If you're in Petersburg, it could be entirely different down in Wrangell, but you know that. You live in Alaska, right? High pressure up across the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, pushing in some low clouds across the eastern coastal plain there, and maybe over the Brooks Range at 1,024 millibars. It's not going to move a lot of wind, but it could move the clouds southward. Watch for some pockets of snow and flurries across the Chukchi coast. High pressure is pretty close to the Bering Strait at 1,023 millibars. And the front that seemed like a pretty stout system moving across the central and western chain is breaking apart as we get into Saturday because of this high pressure ridge that is just holding on for dear life. So it's still in charge. And out across the west, 968 millibar lows trying to hold on as well. That may stick around, but again, it looks like that front's falling apart. Along that boundary, though, periods of rain and snow slowly creeping their way toward the Pribilofs for St. Paul and St. George, and maybe hovering for a while longer across Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, and Nikolsky. Temps today in the 20s and 30s for most of the Panhandle. We saw readings in the lower 40s around the Dixon entrance and into parts of Haida Gwaii, 36 for Sitka, 20s and 30s around Glacier Bay, and then up toward the northern Lynn Canal. Haines and Skagway were in the 30s around the capital city, almost 40 degrees it looked like. 36 around Cordova, Prince William Sound in the lower to mid 20s, low 20s down Cook Inlet, 27 for Kodiak, 6 around Golcana today, 21 for Talkeetna, The Matanuska and Susitna-Borough, blustery a little bit times today. Temperatures back in the low 20s. 0 in Fairbanks at 2 o'clock, about the same there in Eagle, 5 in Northway up at Fort Yukon, 5 above, 15 below in AKwx Pass, 10 to 20 below for the Beaufort Seacoast, 19 below around Barrow, and then Atkasuka about 20 below. As you get down toward Wainwright, 20 below. Kotzebue Sound temperatures 0 in Shishmaref and considerably colder around Kivalina at 15 below. 0 for our friends watching in Nome tonight, about the same there in Unalakleet. 1 degree in Galena. Out towards Savunga, snowed today, 17 to 18 degrees or so by the 2 o'clock hour. 1 around Bethel. McGrath showed 7 degrees above 0. As you get out toward Bristol Bay, teens to about 20 degrees from King Salmon to Dillingham, Lake Iliamna near 9 degrees. 20s for all of the Alaska Peninsula this afternoon, 27 in Sand Point, and about Cold Bay and False Pass, pretty close to the same. 32 around Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, upper 20s for St. Paul and St. George. Adak, Atka, and Shemya all made it into the 30s, and Atka went just a little bit further, up to 43 degrees by late this afternoon. Low temperatures in the interior are going to be cold again. Remember, it's getting warmer, but it isn't going to be warm. Of course, it all depends on what your definition of warm is, right? Mid-20s to mid-30 below 0 degree range for overnight lows around Fairbanks, 20 below. Barrow, about 21 below. Nome, 1 below. Bristol Bay, even getting colder, close to 0, maybe even below that around King Salmon. 21 above, though, for Kodiak, and temps at 0 to about 5 above and 5 below for the Cook Inlet region. The west side is going to be a little bit colder. 20s and 30s for most of southeast, so many places will be above freezing, but it's going to be close. The Alaska Peninsula, teens and 20s there, upper 30s for overnight lows across the chain, and the eastern interior for places like Northway and Eagle and Tok, 20 to 25 below. High temps tomorrow, single digits above 0 for many locations across the middle and eastern Tanana Valley and the upper valley there, 5 above for Fort Yukon. For the Barrow to Kaktovik region, anywhere from about 10 to 20 below. Nome, you're looking at 13. Again, watch out for some of that snow. Low to mid-teens for most of the YK Delta, Nunivak Island, Makoriak, you're looking at 30 degrees, 32 in St. Paul. Upper 20s to upper 30s for most of the Alaska Peninsula to Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, 40s for the central and western Aleutians, and 30s and even low 40s there for southern parts of southeast. So there is warmer air to be had, and it is slowly creeping in. Out across the west coast, watch for IFR in the morning, and that, of course, comes with some snow for places like Nome, St. Lawrence Island, and the outer edge of the YK Delta, the western chain, and parts of the Gulf. Watch for IFR across southern parts of southeast. That's going to be moving northward tomorrow afternoon. MVFR also creeping north as we go. And a little more IFR working down the YK Delta to about Cape Newenham, all the way up past Norton Sound, Seward Peninsula into Kotzebue Sound, and past Point Hope to just about Wainwright, in fact, by the afternoon. Here's your pass conditions. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass right now look to be okay at VFR throughout your Friday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we're going to call VFR. VFR conditions expected for Rainy Pass throughout your day, Windy Pass included, Isabel Pass, visual flight rule there, Mentasta Pass. There could be some clouds that could hold on for a good part of the day. MVFR there if that matters to your flight plans to need a pass. VFR conditions expected. Portage Pass and Chilkoot and White Pass look to be okay, so we're counting on improving weather there in northern parts of southeast. Here's the freezing levels. Not a whole lot to see here across southeast. The surface freezing line just bisecting parts of the Panhandle and then dropping into the northern Gulf out across the chain. And there's our warmer air that's struggling to move northward, but you can see the leading edge of that right across the central and western chain at 2,000 feet. Icing potential is going to be kind of hit and miss, light and pretty sporadic, as you would note with the showers of rain and snow moving through above about 4,000 feet there, above 3,000 feet for the west coast and the northwest coast, the YK Delta there, also light, and then for the central and western chain above 5,000 feet again. So it's going to be pretty hit and miss out across the west. The interior and south central don't look like we have any significant issues there. The jet stream has a powerful northwesterly flow right now that's digging into that low pressure center across the Gulf of Alaska. So we're reinforcing that flow at the surface. Out across the west, we're also reinforcing and strengthening that high pressure ridge across the Bering. So what do we have? It's more or less a blocking pattern where this high is saying we don't want any new weather pattern, and this low is saying that's fine, I'll drag your cold air and wrap it into the Gulf of Alaska. So not a whole lot's changing right now. Where's the action? The powerful part of the jet stream here is still well south of Alaska. At 9,000 feet, northwesterlies are trying to hold on across the Norton Sound region, St. Lawrence Island, and the West Coast, and that's where we get some of our stronger winds here at about 25 to as high as 50 knots. But on the other side of that, you can see the change trying to take shape here with that southeasterly wind coming up to about 40 to 50 knots. Across the eastern and central Gulf of Alaska, low pressure is still driving easterlies across southeast Alaska and northerlies across south central Alaska. Light winds across the North Slope, only 5 to 10 knots there, thanks to high pressure right around Barrow. At 3,000 feet, you can see those northerlies are still working down the west coast and the YK Delta. Winds are still wrapping into low pressure here, but they're a little bit stronger coming in from the east across places like Sitka and Wrangell and southeast Alaska at 20 to 25. Northwesterlies are just east of the Pribilofs, light at 10 knots there, but as you move west and south across the central and western chain, you can see those winds coming up quickly and sharply from the south and southeast, about 40 to 50 knots. Turbulence will be in pretty much the same old places as it was today. If you found some bumps somewhere, chances are it's not going to change a whole lot as you're flying tomorrow. We'll watch for some additional light to isolated moderate across the outer coast of the YK Delta and probably around the Bristol Bay region and over some of the mountains there. If you can see the clouds forming on the south side of the Aleutian chain and the Aleutian range for that matter, there's probably going to be some thumps there if you're flying across the southern coast. Around Kodiak Island and across the northern Gulf, generally below 6,000 feet, well south of Haida Gwaii. So if you've got a long trip flying across the Gulf there, probably won't affect you too much there. And across the central chain below 4,000 feet, a slightly greater risk for some occasional moderate as you get out toward Atka. That's a look at your aviation forecast. In just a few minutes, we'll look at your marine weather and, of course, have an update on the sea ice edge. Stay tuned.
Equinox. Welcome to Stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
Next Monday, March 20th, is the vernal equinox, also known as the official Spring of the Leaf Day.
Meanwhile, next Saturday, March 25th, marks the official Spring of the Year Day.
Plus, we have a really cool double pairing of planets, stars, and our moon on the night of March 20th. What are we talking about? Let's show you. Have you ever wondered why we call spring spring? Well, that word spring is simply short for the phrases spring of the leaf and spring of the year. Now, spring of the leaf is pretty obvious because at this time of year, leaves literally do spring up out of the branches and grass springs up out of the ground. And that's why we call spring spring.
But what does Spring of the Year mean? Believe it or not, before 1752 in England and America, the new year officially began when spring began on March 25th. Or to put it quite simply, the new year sprang up at the same time the leaves and grass did.
In fact, when George Washington and Ben Franklin were young, they and all the other American colonists wished each other Happy New Year and Happy Spring on the same day, on March 25th. However, when the English calendar was reformed, Parliament declared that starting in 1752, the new year would no longer begin in March, but would be celebrated on January 1st, a tradition begun by the Romans in 153 BC.
Now, both springs are related to the vernal equinox, which happens this year on Monday, March 20th at 6:29 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
But what does the term vernal equinox really mean? Let's not forget that the first day of spring is really an astronomical event, which marks one of the days of the year when our sun is smack dab on the celestial equator.
The other day being the first day of autumn. When this happens in September, we call it the autumnal equinox. And when it happens in March, we call it the vernal equinox.
Most people today don't keep track of the sun and its movements throughout the seasons like our ancestors did. But it's a lot of fun to watch the sun change its position on the horizon every day from equinox to equinox.
Starting this week, if you make note of where the sun rises and sets on the horizon each day using landmarks like trees or buildings, you'll notice that the sun will rise just a little bit farther north of east each day and will set a little bit farther north of west each day.
The sun will continue moving northward week after week until June 21st, the first day of summer, the summer solstice, when it will rise its farthest north of east and set its farthest north of west.
after which it will start to move southward week after week until once again it will rise due east and set due west on the autumnal equinox, the first day of autumn in September.
All right, let's see what the planets are doing on the equinox. Okay, we've got our sky set to an hour before sunrise on the morning of Monday, March 20th, the vernal equinox. If you look to the southwest, you'll see the giant planet Jupiter near Virgo's bright blue star Spica.
Jupiter is particularly dazzling right now because in just a few weeks, on April 7th, Jupiter will be at opposition and will appear the biggest and brightest it'll be all year.
If you then look toward the south, you will see a last quarter moon just 5 full moon widths above the ring planet Saturn. The moon and Saturn will be in the constellation Ophiuchus the Serpent Bearer. He's running interference between Scorpius the Scorpion and Sagittarius the Centaur Archer. Well, there you have it, a springtime pairing of astronomical proportions.
So, happy spring of the leaf and happy old-fashioned New Year. Keep looking up.
If you've been keeping track of the ice edge around the Pribilovs, you would know this is the time of the year where that ice edge gets a little bit closer and a little bit closer, and oh my, is it getting real close to St. Paul? Yeah, it's not that far away, really. The northeasterly direction there gives us about 25 to 35 nautical miles from St. Paul. The lower concentrations, below 80% to about 20 or so, indicated here blue, probably even closer than that, but the main ice pack above 80% in concentration is what you're looking at here in white. And we're starting to see some changes with those southerly winds coming up and slightly warmer air. That's going to start lifting that a little bit more to the north and east, while we still have more of that southerly flow that's going to push that ice pack a little bit further south. You notice this open area here looks a little bit different than it did yesterday. Anytime you want to track this, I encourage you to do it. Check it out. There's some really interesting graphics on weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. And not only do you see the concentration here, but you'll also get the thickness information and the movement over the next 5 days. So all those things can help you do a better job in planning what you're going to do out around the ice. Notice there's a polynya here just south of Nunivak Island, and with that northerly flow, that's to be expected. So interesting stuff there. And we still have a lot of the higher concentration ice pushed up against the western side of the Kenai Peninsula, all thanks to your friend, that north wind. Here's a look at southeast, and southeasterly winds are still with us here across the Clarence Strait and the Dixon entrance all the way up towards Sitka, 20 to 25, 9 to 10 foot seas on the outside, 5 foot seas on the inside, and northerlies are still coming down through the Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage, 25 to 30 with 5 to 7 foot seas with east and northeasterly winds up across the north and eastern Gulf. For Saturday, winds are going to start changing a little bit, but we still have some higher gusts to watch for across the Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage. Some of those could reach up towards 50 knots at times, 4 to 7 foot seas there, southeasterlies in the Clarence Strait region, and then those offshore winds south of Sitka and Craig, east and northeasterly flow 20 knots with a 6 foot sea, and diminishing winds up across the north, 15 knots with a 4 to 5 foot sea into the northern Gulf. For south central, northerly winds still coming out of Prince William Sound and past Montague Island, 15 to 20 knots there. As you get out around the Barren Islands, the wind is just snaking its way through the Cook Inlet and then wrapping its way right out around the Barrens, 25 to 35 knots there with 8 to 7 foot seas as you head out in the Gulf. Higher gusts are still possible there with 9 foot seas east of Kodiak Island. As we get into Saturday, not a whole lot of change in direction, but the speeds will diminish a little bit, 15 to 25 across the north and western Gulf. Smaller seas and lighter winds across the Prince William Sound region, and north and northwesterly winds coming down Cook Inlet, 15 to as high as 25 knots with 6 foot seas there west of the Barrens and 4 foot seas in Shelikof Strait. For Bristol Bay, a northwest wind, 15 knots, stronger east of the Aleutian Range and out into the Pacific, 30 knots with a 9-foot sea. Northeasterlies down the Bering Sea coast, 15 knots with a 3-foot sea on Friday. That'll increase to 4-foot seas by Saturday. Northerlies still fairly light across Bristol Bay, and it'll still get more of a northerly direction across the Pacific coast, 15 to 20 with 6 to 9-foot seas there on Saturday. Across the Aleutians, remember we have a front that's trying to work its way north and east across the western chain, and that's where we get into those sharper winds there. 40 knots with a 14-foot sea north of Adak and Atka and as high as 23 feet south of the chain, 24 feet west of Kiska and Attu, and southeasterlies from Atka all the way out toward Unalaska, 25 to 35 with seas in the north up to 13 feet and seas across the Pacific coast up to 16 feet there. By Saturday, that front is already falling apart, and we'll already see those changes reflected in the winds, 10 to 20 knots across the Bering Sea coast and 20 to 25 across the west, with 14 to 16-foot seas and 13 to 16-foot seas from Unalaska all the way out to Adak on the Pacific coast, with winds as high as 15 to 20 knots. Along the west coast, northerlies are still in charge of St. Lawrence Island over the ice, but notice those southerly winds are starting to move up. Southeasterly for St. Paul and St. George, 15 knots with a 4-foot sea. Southwesterlies on either side of Nunivak Island, 15 knots over the ice, and 4-foot seas around the open waters for St. Matthew. By Saturday, though, we get a little bit of a change, don't we? East and northeasterly winds coming off Alaska of 15 knots or so. Easterlies around St. Matthew with a 9-foot sea, and easterlies expected around St. Paul and St. George, 20 knots with a 7-foot sea there. So once again, that ice will be on the move. Up north, light winds across the Beaufort Sea coast, 5 to 10. South and easterly winds for the Chukchi coast. A little bit stronger there, 10 to 20 knots for Friday. For Saturday, winds are fairly light in all areas, 5 to 10 knots with an offshore flow outside of Kotzebue Sound, and Barrow more of a southerly flow at 10 knots with very light 5-knot winds from the northwest around the Beaufort Sea coast for your Saturday. Recapping tonight's weather, watch for rain and snow showers in southeast for the next couple of days. At night, better chance that you'll see snow showers during the day. It's getting warm enough that may switch over to rain with low pressure in the Gulf. Watch for some snow around Nome and parts of the YK Delta and the Norton Sound region. Winds will come up across the central and western chain with high pressure in charge of the interior. Look for slightly warmer weather. Again, remember the air quotes there, getting warmer by day, where temperatures might go above 0 in the next couple days across the interior. That's a look at your Alaska weather. Remember, we're always online and on the radio as well. Thanks for watching. See you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.